Everybody, this is Jono from Seneca. I hope your excitement is at capacity because for your A-level psychology exam, I'm going to be running through capacity studies in this episode. So without further ado, let's dive in with Sperling 1960, where several experiments were conducted to measure the amount of information available to a person after brief exposures to visual stimuli, aka recall of the sensory register. Method. Participants were shown grids of letters, 3 rows of 4 letters. Sperling chose letters because they have a large amount of information and they have been used by previous investigators. Control tests were done first to measure the individual's ability to recall the letters, as this will be unique. Essentially, these were meant to establish a baseline for the individual. The experimenters showed the participants a grid of letters, 3 rows of 4 letters, for 0.05 seconds or 50 milliseconds. There were 2 different scenarios. They either had to recall the whole grid or recall a single row. The row to be recalled was identified by a high, medium, low tone that was played directly after the grid was flashed. The participants did not know which row was to be selected. The results. The first scenario, which was to recall the whole grid, participants only managed to recall 4 or 5 letters out of a total of 12. Second scenario, to recall a single row, they could only recall 3 letters out of a possible 4 letters in one row. These results were consistent no matter which row was selected. Conclusions. First of all, the sensory register is finite. Humans can only process and recall a small amount of sensory information. Secondly, as the participants did not know which row was to be selected, they viewed the whole grid. This means the entire grid was in their sensory register. But they could not recall all of the letters as the trace faded and the information decayed. Evaluation. This was a highly controlled laboratory experiment, so it was scientific and easy to replicate. This means that the results are very reliable. But laboratory experiments such as this do not reflect real-life scenarios. You've hardly, how many times have you had to recall a grid of letters? Really? So the study has low ecological validity. So, why did Sperling conduct control tests to measure each individual's ability to recall letters? This was to establish a baseline for the individual, so that's why that was done. Next, we're going all the way back to 1887, where Jacobs did a study on the capacity of short-term memory. Now, capacity is the measure of how much information can be stored in memory. Jacobs studied the capacity of short-term memory and found that short-term memory has a limited capacity. So this was also a laboratory experiment, and participants were asked to recall a sequence of either letters or digits. They had to recall them in the order in which the sequence was presented. They repeated this procedure until they could not recall the sequence accurately. So a letter sequence example would be A, AO, AOP, AOPH, AOPHQ. You get it. And a digital sequence would be like 998, 984, 9845, 98452, etc., etc. So those were the kind of sequences that Jacobs used. Now, what were the results of this bad guy? So generally, participants could recall a longer string of digits than of letters. On average, they could recall 9 digits and 7 letters. The capacity of short-term memory increased with age. So those were the results of the experiment. Can you remember what they are? Can you shout them back to me? Are you excited about them? So the row recall, participants remembered how many digits. So in the Jacobs experiment, they could recall 9 digits, 7 letters, and the capacity of short-term increased with age. Let's jump back. Do you remember the results of Sperling 1960? So row recall, participants could remember 3 or 4 letters. Grid recall, participants could manage 4 or 5 letters. And the results were consistent no matter which row was selected in the Sperling experiment. Okay, let's finish up with Jacobs and go over the conclusions. So Jacobs concluded that the capacity of short-term memory is finite. There is a limit on how much information can be stored and so recalled within short-term memory. Jacobs established the capacity to be between 5 to 9 pieces of information. The influence of age. The capacity may increase with age because of learning or memory techniques, so like chunking the information. The digital sequence 98452309 can be chunked into 2 sets of numbers, 9845 and 2309, and chunking that information can make it easier to remember. Digit versus letters. Finally, Jacobs concluded that the digits may have been easier to recall because there are only 10 possible digits compared to 26 possible letters. Extraneous variables. A strength of this study is the control of extraneous variables because it was a laboratory experiment. However, because it was a laboratory experiment, it was artificial and lacked ecological validity. Strings of random digits and letters are not very meaningful, so they're less likely to be recalled. A test on meaningful information such as actual words or phone numbers may show that short-term memory capacity is actually larger than concluded in this study. There was also a few methodological issues. A final weakness could be the confusion that could result from similar sequences between current and previous trials. If presented with similar sequences, participants could muddle them up, confounding the results. So that was a quick run through two really important capacity studies. I hope that was a useful run through. Let me know what you thought of the episode. Thank you for joining me, and well done for being proactive with your revision and studying and taking the time to listen to this episode. Look forward to catching you on the next one.